Good morning and welcome to this morning's event, Buying and Selling with the Government of Canada. And we're pleased to feature a special address from Minister Harjit Sajjan. My name is Paul Holden. I'm the President and CEO of the Burnaby Board of Trade. And today we're very pleased to have partnered with our good friends over at the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce on this event. So welcome to everybody from the Tri-Cities Chamber as well. And we're very glad to have you with us here this morning. First, I'd like to start by acknowledging that this event, well, at least where I am, is being held on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam and Squamish nations. We're joined today by a few special guests to discuss buying and selling with the Canadian government and how your business can get involved in that procurement process. Our speakers are here today to provide a platform for entrepreneurs to explore Department of Defence investments and contracts, alongside broader Government of Canada procurement activities and how they positively and tangibly impact regional businesses. So I'd like to start by acknowledging and saying thank you to some of the special guests that we have here today. Obviously, we have the Honourable Harjit Sajjan, Minister of National Defence and MP for Vancouver South, who we'll be hearing from very shortly. I'd also like to welcome Terry Beach, MP for Burnaby North and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and Ron McKinnon, who's the MP for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam. Thank you all for attending and joining us today. So we'll kick off by hearing from one of those special guests, the MP Terry Beach, who will be introducing our keynote speaker. Terry, thanks for coming today, and over to you.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thanks for having me today. To everyone out there, hello, bonjour à tous. I want to begin by echoing your acknowledgement about where I am, which is on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. It's great to be back again speaking with business leaders in Burnaby. It's also fantastic to have an opportunity to connect with the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce. The work you've done to keep our local economies moving throughout this unprecedented pandemic has been nothing short of inspiring. Thousands of families in our community have been able to keep food on the table because of the work that you've done to adapt and to persevere. I also want to thank all of you for taking the time to reach out and share your voice regarding the COVID-19 programs our government has been putting into place over this last year. Whether it was early on when we brought the Canadian Emergency Business Account, this past fall when we rolled out the Improved Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, and the extension of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, or just this month when we introduced the new Highly Affected Sectors Credit Availability Program. We've been committed all along to ensuring that your feedback directly shapes the programs we put in place to support you. That feedback was a part of the recent extension to June 5th, which was announced yesterday. Today, it's really exciting to have the Minister of National Defence, Harjit Sajjan, join us to talk about the IDEAS program. When we talk about the work that's being done by the Canadian Armed Forces, we know that defending Canada at home and overseas requires cutting-edge equipment and infrastructure. So we're counting on industry to help us come up with homegrown solutions to our most pressing defense challenges. There's no question that investing in defense is great for local businesses, for communities, and for the country. It's going to be a key driver of economic recovery as we emerge from this pandemic. Here in Burnaby, North Vancouver, and in the Tri-Cities, we have a thriving ecosystem of innovative companies on the cutting edge of everything from renewable energy development to advanced biotechnology. The big question is, how best can we partner and benefit from your innovation and from your creativity? I remember talking to the Minister of Defense about how envious I was of the DARPA program in the United States, where innovative technologies were early adopted by the government. It has brought us all kinds of benefits that are well beyond their initial use. And of course, the minister's response to me at the time was like, we are doing that. We just need to tell more people about it, and we need to get our local innovators hooked up with the government. And that's what today is all about. Having these conversations here today and exploring further opportunities to partner and work together, it's critically important as we continue to foster growth in our community. So this morning, Minister Sajjan will discuss ways we can work closely together, followed by Eric and Scott, who will talk about innovation and how to collaborate with the federal government. Harj, of course, is also the member for Vancouver South. And I don't want to jinx anything here, but is getting very, very close to being the longest serving Minister of Defense in Canada's history. So with that, I will happily pass the floor to our guest of honor today. Over to you, Harj.
Hey, and thank you very much, Terry. And thanks for all the work that you do. And I love our shared conversations on innovation, and having your viewpoints was so important. I also want to acknowledge my good friend Ron McKinnon as well.
Laptop, I don't know.
So is everyone on mute? Just want to make sure. Okay, there we go. So before I begin, I want to acknowledge that we are participating today on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, and the Katzie First Nations. And I'm actually speaking to you from the Algonquin territory. Thank you to the Burnaby Board of Trade and the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to join today's event. Now, we all know, as Terry mentioned, this has been an extremely challenging time for businesses in British Columbia. You have all been doing your part to keep our community safe, and for many, this has come with a financial cost. Our government recognizes the scope of these challenges, and we're doing everything we can to help workers, families, and businesses to get through this. We hear you and we see you. And today, I'm here to talk with you about how investing in defense supports regional economies and brings jobs, growth, and innovation to communities across Canada. Now, investing in defense is critical to innovation. That's why I'm proud today to announce 48 new contribution agreements through the IDEAS program at National Defense, valued at $8.64 million. The Innovation in Defense Excellence and Securities Programs, or short for IDEAS, is all about Canadian innovators and entrepreneurs. That's why it was created, applying their best solutions to the most pressing defense and security challenges that we currently face. Now, I've always championed this program because it stimulates Canadian innovation, creates jobs for people who might not have typically been seen themselves as a defense company, and to help to stimulate the economy and innovation, all while producing amazing results for the women and men of our Canadian Armed Forces. These contribution agreements will support Canadian innovators working on 4 COVID-related challenges we launched last spring: on pandemic decision-making, workspace sanitization, reusing protective equipment, and trauma and stress on the front line. Now, this research supports the Government of Canada's commitment last year to refocus existing innovation programs like IDEAS to support Canada's effort to fight COVID-19. The 48 projects we selected for funding span a wide range of promising fields, from artificial intelligence technology that analyzes public health policy options, to a gadget that can detect aerosol droplets containing genetic material, to internet-based resources for frontline workers dealing with extreme stress, to research into 3D printing and personal protective equipment at Simon Fraser University. And right here in Burnaby, researchers are looking into whether a molecule known to stop pathogen growth can be embedded in 3D printing clothing, ideal for PPE. I'm continually amazed by the proposals we've received from top innovators across the country. What we've learned over the past year and what we'll continue learning through these challenges will help strengthen our pandemic response. Our organization has been contributing to pandemic response since last winter, starting with the repatriation flights from Wuhan and Yokohama. Canadian Armed Forces members have helped stabilize long-term care facilities in Quebec and in Ontario through the spring and the summer, while Canadian Rangers continue supporting Northern and Indigenous communities to this day. And today, military and civilian members of the defense team are playing a vital role in vaccine distributions from coast to coast to coast. Everyone benefits from research and development that keeps the Canadian Armed Forces agile, ready to anticipate, adapt quickly, and to act. And because adapting quickly is one of the main goals of our defense policy, Strong, Secure, and Engaged, or SSE we call it, we're investing $1.6 billion over 2 decades into the IDEAS program. Over the first 5 years, our goal is to invest $313 million to spur innovation in many fields. In the first year alone, we received more than 600 proposals from innovators across Canada and awarded more than 200 contracts. There's a wide scope for the research, and I'm excited to see what innovators and entrepreneurs like you will come up with. Here in BC, we've already awarded 81 contracts, 13 grants, and 8 contribution agreements totaling more than $33 million, This means more jobs and more opportunities for people here at home. So if you're an innovator or researcher with a promising idea, and we see that your idea has merit, we'll support you from the concept stage to the prototype testing to capability development. The government recognizes how much creativity there is in private sector. And through ideas, we said we wanted to tap into the massive knowledge reservoir, and we're doing exactly that. Besides innovation, investing in defense involves large-scale capital and infrastructure projects. Over at Seaspan's Vancouver shipyards, under the non-combat package of the National Shipbuilding Strategy, we're building 2 new joint supply ships for the Royal Canadian Navy. These will be among the largest ships ever built in Canada. Seaspan is also delivering 4 ships for the Canadian Coast Guard. These shipbuilding contracts employ over 1,000 workers at Seaspan and hundreds more directly and indirectly through Canada's industrial and technological benefits policy. More on that policy in a moment, though. Although we don't see a lot of uniformed Canadian Armed Forces members personnel on the streets of Burnaby and Port Moody, Canada's military community has been sizable in BC for decades. Our province is home to roughly 5,600 regular force members, 3,000 reservists, and just over 2,600 civilians defense team members. Now, although that's more than 11,000 women and men working for or with the military at 19 Wing CFB Comox, at the Maritime Pacific Forces Headquarters at CFB Esquimalt, at the Canadian Forces Maritime Experimental and Test Ranges at Nanoose Bay, and at 39 Brigade Group Headquarters right in Vancouver. It's here on the West Coast where our military's highly trained search and rescue technicians are based, and where they graduate each year after months of grueling instruction. It's where the Royal Canadian Navy sailors say goodbye to their loved ones as they deploy for months-long missions in the Asia-Pacific region. And it's where our West Coast fleet receives world-class in-service support. Now, all of these activities, both on and off base, have a considerable economic impact on surrounding communities and the province as a whole. And they're essential to the plan that we laid out in our defense policy. Now, SSE was built on consultations with Canadians from all walks of life, including the business community right here in British Columbia, to make sure that we understood what Canadians expected and needed from their military. At the end of this process, we arrived at a clear vision for the Canadian Armed Forces, fully supported and fully funded, and a clear vision for Canada to be strong at home, secure in North America, and engaged in the world. It's a policy focused on people and how we provide them with the support, the infrastructure, and the equipment they need to carry out their challenging work. Under our policy, defense investments is growing from $18.9 billion in 2016 to $32.7 billion by 2026. We're buying new equipment, updating infrastructure, and supporting defense team personnel from coast to coast to coast. We're building a more inclusive organization that's more representative of the Canadian society. And we are growing the forces so that we have the people we need to meet our challenges today and into the future. That includes growing the reserve force, which provides critical support when floods, fires, and other natural disasters strike our communities. We also guarantee full-time summer employment for reservists in their first 4 years of service. If you know any members of your community looking for a challenge and who want to sharpen their skills, this could be a great opportunity for them. It's also great for university students. One of the biggest challenges facing reservists is how to balance their military life and their civilian life. And I know this because I used to be a reservist. It's especially difficult if they don't have a supportive employer, if they think that they might lose their job or be passed up over for promotion in their civilian career. So I want to stress how much the Government of Canada appreciates the business community's support for reservists and for the entire military community in British Columbia. And right here at home, we have been busy. Now, last summer, we finished cleaning up the seabed at the Wide Jetty and Land Cove, and in its early days, it was known as the Yarrows Shipyard and was used to build ships and vessels for the Navy and Canada's Merchant Navy. The contamination from these activities had a severe impact on the health of the harbor environment over the years. Now government is committed to protecting our coastline, and that's why we're making strides to clean up our act. This was a significant milestone for the $162.5 million Esquimalt Harbor remediation project. It clears the way for infrastructure upgrades at a CFB Esquimalt, including the construction of a modern jetties that can accommodate our new incoming ships. This massive undertaking was the first remediation project in Esquimalt Harbor to include a comprehensive Indigenous benefits plan. It's a unique arrangement that prioritized training, employment, and more than $1 million in procurement contracts for the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. The harbor cleanup is part of the nationwide effort to be more environmentally responsible. We are addressing past and present environmental concerns, and we're on track to meet federal targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% in 2025, 5 years ahead of schedule. Our bases and wings across the country, we're making all sorts of energy efficiency improvements to existing facilities. And we want to keep partnering with Canadian businesses that specialize in sustainable technology to reach our emission reduction targets. Of course, procurement goes well beyond infrastructure, though. To keep our biggest capital projects on track, the Prime Minister has asked me to work with the Public Service Procurement Canada, Minister Nunn, to ensure timely delivery, enhanced transparency. We've simplified project approvals, prioritized research and development, and increased our engagement with industry. Today, I want to highlight 3 important resources you can use to find details about investment and procurement opportunities with national defense. 1 is our Defense Investment Plan, 2, the Defense Capabilities Blueprint, and 3, the government's buy and sell website. Our investment plan outlines all the key capital equipment, infrastructure, IT, and services that we are delivering through SSE. We are providing industry with as much information as we can about investment opportunities that will generate jobs and economic growth here in British Columbia and across the country. My department also updates Defense Capabilities Blueprint on a regular basis. It's a website anyone can use to see requirements for capital equipment, IT, and infrastructure projects over $5 million, and service support contracts worth more than $20 million. Together, these resources offer an overview of 20 years worth of defense investments with a searchable database that can contain information on 240 major capital and technology projects. And although the COVID-19 pandemic delayed our latest update on the Defense Investment Plan, I can tell you that 31% of the projects in SSE are either completed or in closeout. Now, this speaks volume about 2 things: how well industry is answering the call to support the military, and how we are streamlining our internal procurement processes. And there is more work to be done, and we need your help. For local businesses, one of the best tools at your disposal is the buy and sell website. It's comprehensive, easy to navigate, and helps you understand the scope of our procurement needs. The federal government is proud to work in close partnership with Canadian companies like yours to make sure that the military has the capabilities it needs to keep pace with our allies and stay ahead of our adversaries. One way we do this is with the Canada's Industrial and Technological Benefits Policy, which leverages defense and Canadian Coast Guard contracts to support jobs, innovation, and economic growth right here at home. Companies that win defense contracts must undertake business activities in Canada equal to the value of those contracts. This applies to all defense and Coast Guard procurements over $100 million. We see this with local suppliers working with C-SPAN on the Joint Support Ship projects. Companies like Summit Valve and Controls Incorporated of Port Coquitlam, and Armor Alloys Limited in Coquitlam as well. Now, this means economic benefits in the form of well-paying jobs locally and export opportunities globally. We want businesses here in British Columbia and right across the country to be confident when making hiring decisions, designing equipment, and investing in research and development. We're also aware that Canadians have vested interest in how we manage defense funds. in part because these are their taxpayer dollars. Investing in defense will be absolutely critical to the post-pandemic economic recovery in Canada. But with the SSE as our guide, we are acting responsibly and transparently to equip the Canadian Armed Forces for decades to come. And we are eager to work with the best companies and brightest minds right here in British Columbia to make it happen. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning. It was great to hear some of that information that you shared with us just on the incredible value there is in investing in the national defence here in Canada. So thank you very much for sharing that. And as I said, we really do appreciate you taking the time. Before we move on to the next part, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping, just to remind some people, or just to remind everybody of a couple of things. One is that this is being recorded for sharing with the members of the Burnaby Board of Trade and the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce. So that'll be happening for those that weren't able to make it here live with us today. Please make sure that you're muted while people are speaking. We want to obviously eliminate any background noise. I think we're muting everybody up ourselves, but just make sure that you remain in that state if you don't mind. And towards the end of the event today, we'll be having a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please just pop them in the chat room or the Q&A box, and we'll get to those as we reach the Q&A point. So thanks for that. And moving on now to the next speaker, I'd like to introduce Eric Fournier, who's the Director General, Science and Technology for the Department of National Defence. Mr. Fournier is a scientific advisor to the Department of National Defence and to the Canadian Armed Forces. His role is to provide analysis support on policy and strategy and enterprise resource management to the department. And I'm very pleased to welcome him to say a few words today. Eric, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. So, Minister, members of the Burnaby Board of Trade and Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce, good morning. In Ottawa, it's the afternoon, but on the West Coast, it's still morning. So, as leader of the Innovation for Defense, Excellence and Security Programs, IDEAs in short, I can only agree with the Minister who presented some of the COVID-19 accomplishment of the program. These are challenging times and unique issues have presented themselves. We, as part of the Government of Canada, so my whole team, have recognized this and responded to it. So the IDEAS team associated itself with the National Research Council of Canada, some of our colleagues, Public Health Agency of Canada, Health Canada, and worked closely with Canadian innovators to identify ways to fight this pandemic. And the results were announced today. So 48 projects covering many aspects of this pandemic and investment in Canadian mines. And by the way, 7 of those were in British Columbia. Well, we set our focus for these call for proposals to the 4 challenges mentioned by the Minister. This is not where our efforts ended, however. IDEAS also work with our colleagues from these departments to directly fund technologies and research in various domains. So we looked at research on decontamination of N95 masks. We looked at advanced ventilator research. We looked at fast testing and a few more things. So we were busy during that period. I also want to highlight the IDEAS demonstrated agility in those trying times. We have this successful innovation program, and we made sure we're able to quickly refocus and invest in possible solutions for this pandemic. Now, while we modified our program of work for the past several months to continue the fight against the pandemic, we are now shifting back our resources to our primary mandate, so addressing defense and security challenges. So this program of work, developed with our defense partners, is not only an integral part of the new Defense Research and Development Canada, so in short, ERDC, Defense and Security Science and Technology Program, but it's critical in addressing some of the areas identified by the Canadian Armed Forces for the Canadian Armed Forces. And that's the important part. They identified the areas we worked on. The IDEAS team has always been committed to keeping people informed and abreast of our activities, and we do this through our website. And we've been updating it regularly, and I would advise people to have a look at it, IDEAS Defense, where all of our information is posted. So it's back to business. So today we're talking about doing business with defense, and we're hard at work to launch the next call for proposals that will again solicit the innovation of Canadians to support CAF needs. We're presently working with our colleagues throughout the Department of National Defense to identify the multiple challenges that we will need to do this. IDEAS works on challenges that we pose to innovators. So we need challenges for our program of work for the next 12 months. How do we do this? Well, by working directly with the Royal Canadian Navy, the Royal Canadian Air Force, Director General Space, Cyber, and many more in the department, and building a portfolio of challenges to be presented to the Canadian innovation community. This is where we ask for your expertise, your knowledge through our call for proposal in helping to develop solutions for these challenges. We are tracking to potentially have our next call for proposals in May-June timeframe using those new challenges. As part of this new calls and then future calls to come as well, we will be focusing on one of the department key priorities of greening defense. IDEAS has in the past call launched several challenges in this domain and will be doing more in the future. We recognize that it's an important domain of work for our members and also for the Canadian government. So far, IDEAS is almost 3 years old in April, and we've hit some amazing numbers since launching. We have awarded more than $160 million in funding, and as the minister mentioned, more than $30 million was in British Columbia. Signed more than 450 contracts, contribution agreements, and grants with innovators across Canada. Launched 58 challenges, all that with the 5 tools that we have developed to reach Canadians. So competitive projects, contests, sandbox, innovation network, and test drive. Again, more information can be found on our webpage. And we have invested across every province in Canada, all 10 of them. We're still expecting, hopefully at some point, a proposal from a territory, but we haven't received any yet. These numbers clearly demonstrate the value of not only IDEAS of the IDEAS program, but of the Canadian innovators for national defense. And we're already seeing some of our first results being transferred to our military partners, which is a major significant milestone. For example, there is a cyber defense system developed through the IDEAS process by a small medium enterprise from New Brunswick that's now being tested by our Canadian Armed Forces partners. So the Special Forces have now acquired this new technology and are testing it. Another example of this progress is in the domain of detection and classification of objects of interest. The solution from a Canadian innovator again, and other small medium enterprises, has been identified, has been funded, and is slowly being transferred to our military partners as well. But progress also requires reflection and assessment of our business practices. IDEAS is a fairly large program, and it's my commitment to ensure that we continually monitor and identify areas where we can expand on, and also areas where we can provide efficiencies. We're not perfect, and we're trying always to fix to better our program in a way. As we evolve and grow and adapt, I will ensure that we keep our stakeholders, everybody on this call, for example, informed. In closing, if I can ensure that there is one takeaway from this session, it's that IDEAS is a great opportunity for all innovators, from the small, medium enterprises to big industry to academia to non-for-profit, to showcase their expertise in innovation thinking, and for the Canadian government to leverage those great minds and ideas with the Canadian innovators. We look forward to forging new relationship, hopefully with some of you today on this call, and hope to work with you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric. Much appreciated. Next, I'd like to call on Scott Dara, who's the Deputy Director of Industry Relations for the Department of National Defence. Scott is responsible for providing leadership on the management of Canadian defence industry relations in support of the material acquisition and support mandate of the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces. Scott, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good day, everyone. Thank you for having me. As just mentioned, I'm from the Material Group at the Department of National Defence. We're responsible primarily for the procurement policy, as well as the implementing of projects to deliver capability to the Canadian Armed Forces, and also for the sustainment and lifecycle support of Canadian Armed Forces equipment. As you heard earlier this morning from the Minister of National Defence, Canada plans to spend a considerable amount of money on procurement of new capability for the Canadian Armed Forces over the next several years. I'd like to spend the next few minutes discussing how Canadian business can learn more about those opportunities and how they can take advantage of them. The first thing to understand is that defense procurement is a lengthy and complex process. Meeting military requirements is not as simple as walking down to your local car dealership or the local megamart. Given the cost and complexity, and also the operational implications of getting it wrong, National Defence has recognized the importance of engaging with Canadian industry early in the defence procurement process. That dialogue allows both the Government of Canada and the industry to make more informed decisions. That engagement with the industry really does start with two documents that were referenced by the Minister. The Defence Investment Plan, which provides an overview of all of the Department of National Defence's planned expenditures over the 20-year timeframe of Strong, Secure and Engaged. And the companion piece, the Defence Capabilities Blueprint, which is an online database that contains a ton of information about funding ranges, timelines, types of procurements for over 250 projects that are outlined in Strong and Secure and Engaged. With this information, industry should be able to make informed decisions about things like research and development, strategic partnerships, which opportunities they would really like to make their investments in and pursue. My department updates this Defence Investment Plan and Defence Capabilities Blueprint on a regular basis. And both of these resources can be found on the Department of National Defence's website or by using your favorite internet search. Another excellent resource for Canadian business is the Buy and Sell website. And I'm sure my colleagues at OSME will go into this in more detail later, but I just wanted to touch on a few things. It contains a wealth of information about the Government of Canada's procurement policies, rules, and processes. It also contains notifications for industry engagement days on specific projects, official requests for information where companies can submit information on their capabilities, their products, invitations to qualify where you might be interested in pursuing an opportunity, and of course, requests for proposals. If you are new to defense procurement, I would encourage you to avail yourself of this valuable resource. The Minister also touched on the ITB policy. If you're a small or medium enterprise or you're new to defense procurement, one of the best ways to break into the defense market is not by selling to the Department of National Defense, but in fact, selling to those who already sell to us. As the Minister mentioned, under the ITB policy, contractors that win contracts over $100 million must undertake business activity in Canada equal to the value of their contract. Hence, to satisfy the obligations to Canada, prime contractors are looking for opportunities to invest in Canadian innovations, to do business in Canada, or to support Canadian companies in their export pursuits abroad. The Department of Industry, Science and Economic Development Canada maintains a website where they list all of the companies that have ITB obligations to the Crown and how much of those obligations are still outstanding. And more importantly, points of contacts in those companies that you can reach out to explore potential opportunities to do business with them. The intent of the policy is to leverage defense and Canadian Coast Guard procurements to support jobs, innovation, and economic growth. But it can also serve as a valuable tool, a gateway for small and medium enterprises to gain experience in the defense market and obtain opportunities in the defense market. In closing, I would like to note that Canada's defense policy, Strong, Secure and Engaged, was really the first defense policy in modern history to recognize the importance of a strong defense industrial base, both to the Canadian Armed Forces, but also to the Canadian economy. And I believe the publication of documents like the investment plan, the Defense Capabilities Blueprint, open and predictable defense procurement processes, tools like Buy and Sell, the ITB policy, and more frequent and early engagement with industry through events like this, through industry days, will really help to build a stronger defense industrial base and also support the Canadian Armed Forces. With that, I thank you again for having me here today, and I hope you found this useful.
Thank you very much, Scott. Very much appreciated. Thanks for joining us today. Next, I'd like to introduce Rochelle Boyett, Senior Business Officer, Western Economic Diversification for the BC region. Rochelle is the lead officer for the ITB and advanced manufacturing files for the BC region. Rochelle, thanks for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Unmute. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today. I'm just going to make sure I can advance my slide deck. Great to hear the minister and Eric and Scott reference the ITB policy. I probably don't need the slide deck, but I will walk you through very quickly a bit of a 101 of the ITB policy. As mentioned, I'm from a department called Western Economic Diversification Canada, and WD is one of the 5 regional development agencies located across Canada, and our mandate is to grow, diversify, and increase the competitiveness of our regional economies. And we do that through programs and advocacy work. And I'm in Vancouver, and we've got about 70 people in our BC office working towards those things. So let me just advance that. I'm going to do a very quick overview of how the government leverages economic benefits and innovation from defense procurement through something called the ITB policy, and thus referenced many times already. So I'll also speak a bit about how the ITB policy supports innovation, the economic impact of the policy, and then I'll conclude of some tips of how to get involved. So just to back up a bit, and it was kind of referenced, but there are 3 main components and players involved in defense procurements in Canada. So D&D, we've heard from our colleagues, determines Canada's technical requirements and specs for the platform or the goods being procured, and they're ultimately the end users. Public Services and Procurement Canada acts as the contracting authority for all the projects and manages the stakeholder engagement and the cost and technical evaluations. And then Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, or ISED, determines the requirements to foster economic growth in Canada. And they do this by applying and managing the ITB policy. The ITB policy has been around since 1986, and most developed countries do have similar policies, and they're referred to as offsets. As mentioned, with some great examples, the ITB policy essentially requires successful defense contractors to make investments in Canada equal to the value of the contract that they've won. So, for example, if Canada buys a fleet of military helicopters from a company through a $2 billion contract, that company must commit to investing $2 billion in the Canadian economy over a fixed period of time. And usually that is the life of the contract, which can be upwards of a decade or more. So these investments or transactions may be directly related to the equipment that is being purchased, for example, buying the engines that go into those helicopters, or they may be in other sectors of the economy that the company does business in. So essentially, at kind of the simplest level, then an ITB investment or transaction is a business-to-business transaction. It was mentioned, when does it apply? It applies to all eligible defense and Coast Guard contracts over $100 million. It's discretionary under that. And just on the left-hand side of the screen, one of the biggest takeaways from the general aspects of the policy is that this is a market-driven policy. So the company who is responsible for undertaking ITB transactions in Canada, it was referred to, I think Scott referred to them as prime contractors, we call them obligors. They will be ultimately driven by what makes business sense to them. The policy does have some mechanisms to target certain industrial areas. We try to ensure there's a regional distribution of transactions that make sense across the country, and of course encourage doing business with SMEs. Advance there. Slide 5 here. So here's a sense of the portfolio. There's about 36 billion in current economic obligations under the policy, and that's involving more than 600 companies, organizations rather, benefiting from active ITB projects. Right now on the books, there are over 5.3 billion in future opportunities, and those represent obligations that have not yet been identified, but where obligors are seeking strategic partnerships with industry, with Canadian industry. And that 5.3 billion doesn't include some of the significant procurements that will be launched in the near future. Canadian surface combatant, future fighter capability, and future air crew training programs. So all that said, there's a lot of opportunities for Canadian industry. Just on the topic of innovation, although I referred to an ITB transaction, it's commonly a business-to-business transaction, an obligor who's buying a good or service. In terms of innovation, ISED can incent certain activities from obligors. For example, the policy provides a multiplier for obligors if they invest in post-secondary institute, a public research institute, or an R&D consortia. So as an example, a $1 million investment into an R&D center, an obligor could actually get up to $5 million of credit towards their ITB obligations. Likewise, there are several multipliers under what is called the investment framework, or R&D investments into SMEs. In terms of economic impact, the policy contributes close to 46,000 jobs across the country and more than 5 billion to our GDP annually. And the policy also supports the scaling of more than 400 SMEs from across the country. More than 40 academic and research organizations are benefiting from innovation and skills commitments from the ITB projects. And many SMEs are also benefiting from increased export opportunities. So that was a relatively quick run through of the policy and a bit about how it works. It's a bit of a broad subject. Here's what really matters. I'm going to leave you with this slide. I'll pick a few, but there's some resources listed that have already been referenced. Essentially, do your homework. If you're interested in the space, find out what companies you want to work with, who are they working with across the supply chain, understand their requirements, whether you need certain certifications, qualifications to do business with them, and understand upcoming defense contracts, buy and sell website, ISED's website that was already referenced. Overall, be patient, and that's Scott's message there. The ITB policy is really no different than any other business development activity, but it is in the defense world and working with large companies. Timelines are typically a lot longer. And I'll leave you with just a final note. Myself and my team at WD can help you with all of the above. So we have a role in helping firms navigate the policy, understanding the players, and promoting BC capabilities. So I believe my contact information will be shared, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. Appreciate you joining us today. Excuse me. Now I'd like to move on to the workshop component of today's event. And for this part, for the workshop, we have Tara Hartley, the Regional Director for the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises, Public Services and Procurement Canada, to help us with facilitation. Tara has over 25 years of experience in the federal public service, and she and her team help businesses understand how to do business with the Government of Canada. They also work with their procurement colleagues to promote fair, open access to procurement opportunities. So Tara, over to you.
Right. I'm gonna try to keep this short and workshoppy at the same time. So that's always a little bit of a challenge. And then the other thing that I really want to do is make sure I'm leaving plenty of time for questions, because a lot of my other co-presenters this morning had very short amount of time. But honestly, if we probe a little bit with some questions, there are real gold mines that you were shown the doors to this morning, and it would be great for you to have an opportunity to ask more questions for them. So really there are kind of call it five things that I'd really like you to take away from what I'm going to share this morning, and a lot of it's going to overlap with all of the other presenters this morning. And the first really is that the Government of Canada can be a client for you. So some of you may be thinking, but I don't sell in the defense space, and both Eric and Rochelle kind of alluded to the fact that there are things that we don't traditionally think of, or companies that might think they're not in the defense space, where there are definitely opportunities even within defense and defense related procurement, or those industrial and technical benefits, because of the things that go into those supply chains. So I guess I need to update my bio, because it's now actually over 30 years. In the over 30 years that I've been in the public service, the vast majority of that in procurement, I think I'm almost up to 10 things that the government of Canada does not buy. So when people ask me, can you send me a list of things the government buys? The answer is, sure, I could. And then it would take you the next 3 weeks to read through that list. So generally, I would say it's pretty safe to assume that whatever it is that you sell, there is probably a client in government for that. Sometimes it's going to be a very specialized client. Sometimes it may be there's only one department or one office of one department that buys it. In some ways that makes it easier because then you're not trying to guess who all to talk to. You can talk to that one office. The other thing is, and all of the speakers today have also mentioned the fact that there really is space for smaller businesses. I did a presentation a few years ago about, can I still do business with the government if my whole company can fit in a minivan? And then someone came back to me and said, okay, but what if my whole company fits in a smart car? And the answer in both cases is still very much yes. Yes, it's true. You're probably not going to build the future fighter capability in your one-person office, but there will for sure be elements that feed into that, into civilian type procurement that absolutely one-person companies, solopreneurs can definitely participate. The second, so the first one is that the government of Canada can be a client. The second is how to find opportunities. And I promise I didn't pay the other people who have all talked about buy and sell, and Rochelle very kindly included that link on her slides. So it is buy and sell, all one word, .gc.ca. And as a lot of people have mentioned, that is both where you can find tender opportunities for all of the things that we are publicly tendering, and the rules and the potential contract clauses, and information about the seminars and webinars that we present on a regular basis. And I'm going to come back to this because it actually can be, even if you're not looking for particular tender opportunities, it can be a huge, huge source of business intelligence, both in the defense space and in the civilian space. So that for sure is the second thing to remember. The third thing is a lot of people don't understand how to bid. We talked about the fact that defense procurement, and honestly all of government procurement, can definitely seem really complicated. It can seem overwhelming. We know that large companies pay teams to decide when to bid on government contracts and to know how to do that. But there definitely are ways to shortcut that learning for smaller businesses. And there are also a lot of opportunities that can be done with credit card buys. Finding those is harder, but the process is easier. And how do you kind of learn all of that? In addition to the webinars and seminars or information like today, the best thing I can do is encourage you to reach out to us. It is most valuable for you if we can sit down with just your company and talk about what it is that you sell, who in the government might be a client, whether you're looking at publicly tendered opportunities, whether you're looking at the supply chain, whether you're looking at some of those credit card purchases, what might be the best approach. We're never going to tell you how to run your business, but we can help kind of figure out which of those choices might be better. And then we also referred to the fact that there is a lot of complexity, and the fact that complexity is there to protect all of us as taxpayers and make sure that we're doing the best job that we can with that. Like I said, I've been around for 30 years. Sometimes the answer to questions about why do you do things a certain way is because that's the way we've always done it. and maybe it's time that we reconsider that and change it. So that's one of the other things that our office does is take those things that surface and help try to shift those. And you heard again today about a number of initiatives to streamline things, to make things easier, to speed up processes. And that's definitely where if you're running into challenges, let us know. Some of them we can address, some of them it's a longer term process. So that's really kind of the four things. And then the fifth one is call us, please call us, reach out to us. So that's the 5. We can be a client. We can help you find the opportunities. We can help you understand how to bid. Yes, it's complicated. There is help. It is a little bit challenging to run kind of a workshop when we're all virtual. But what I would really encourage you to do with some time right now is to go to buyandsell.gc.ca and take a look, search for whatever it is you sell. It's a very powerful search engine, so it's going to turn up a lot of things. But one of the first things it will turn up most likely will be something called a GSIN, GSIN, Goods and Services Identification Number. And knowing that coding for what you sell can make the whole rest of the search a whole lot easier. Because it's a powerful search engine, and some words will come up in different contexts between whether the search engine is looking for it in English and or in French. So being able to figure out quickly what 4-digit code applies to what you sell. That's not the NAICS codes. It is a purchasing code. Will just make the rest of the searching a lot easier. You'll also see that as you do that search, there are links to the tender opportunities. There are links to which departments are buying things. So it's about a $23 billion a year market, the Government of Canada procurement market. And I specifically there said the procurement market because Eric and the minister both referred to ideas and referred to grants and contributions. So those are other means of moving money from the government to companies that would not be included in that 23 billion that we talk about, this procurement contracts. The other thing that it doesn't count is a lot of the credit card buys. So there are a lot of opportunities. Sorry, I just got distracted because I saw the chat as we were speaking. I'll come back to looking at questions there. The other thing that you'll see with just one keyword search down that side, so which departments buy those things, where, so you'll see where the region of delivery is, and you'll see who are some of the winners who have won contracts in that kind of space before. It doesn't include the contact information for those companies, but it gives you a really good sense of who's already in this space, either as potential competition, because they're the ones who are already winning those contracts, or as potential clients for you as means to get into the government supply chain. All right, I'm gonna switch over just really quickly and look at the questions. Okay, that's fine. It looks like one that we can follow up on afterwards. The other website that I would refer you to in terms of a good one for opportunities is something that we call the Government Electronic Directory Service. And you can either do an internet search for that one, or the easy way to do it is the acronym, which is GEDS. But if you do that, put it GEDS and also SAGE, SAGE, which is the SAGE, which is the French version of that acronym. And if you put both acronyms in the search bar, then almost always that will be the first search result that comes up. I sometimes refer to this as the shopping list, because it'll bring up a blue box where you can put somebody's name in. If you already know my name or Rochelle's name, you can put that in. Less so the speakers from defense, for kind of somewhat obvious reasons. Not all of the people in defense are listed in GEDS, but certainly Rochelle and I are there. You can find that, or below that, you'll see that there's a link and it says Directory of Federal Public Servants. And then the whole list of departments and agencies come up. And that can be a way to kind of help think about who relevant clients might be. So almost always one of the first ones will be agriculture and agri-food, because it's an alphabetical list, or the Atlantic Canada Pilotage Authority. So for most of us here in BC, that's probably not going to be the first client you're going to go after. Although depending on what space you're in, there is in fact a possibility that that is of interest to you. So you can kind of go down and think, yes, yes, no, no, maybe, down the list of departments to think, who is it who is most likely to buy the things that I sell. And then the departments structure their directories a little bit differently, one to another, but you can usually find people, and it takes a little bit of navigating. We can help you with that as well. Usually we'll sit down and kind of walk through a couple of sample departments with you to help you identify how to navigate those. And those are great places to go if you've got questions about what people are doing, how they buy. They'll almost always refer you to the procurement people in their respective departments. But if you are in a really particular business related to agriculture, then you're probably going to want to focus not only on agriculture and agri-food, but it's going to be pretty easy for you to identify, maybe which science or research or whatever group you're looking at, and to talk to them about the kinds of contracts that they have. It's very rare that we're allowed to talk about really specific procurement requirements before they show up, but we absolutely can talk generally about the kinds of things that we buy. I'm going to stop there, which is a little bit early, because I for sure wanted to leave time for questions. Like I said, not only for me, but really for some of the other speakers, because there are some really, really good pieces of information there. I don't know whether we want to ask Rochelle to bring her slide deck back up, specifically slide 6, Rochelle, and talk to all of the other speakers in terms of any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Tara. Rochelle, did you want to share that that slide again? And
yes.
We'll see if any questions are coming forward.
Let's see if I can do that. Oh, share. There we go.
There we go.
How's that looking?
Yeah, and maybe given that we've got a little bit of time as we wait for some questions to come through, Rochelle, maybe I know you said I'll just touch on a couple of the highlights from that screen in terms of some pointers. Perhaps we could ask you to make use of the next few minutes and maybe give a little bit more of a broader feel as to the processes that businesses can be made aware of and things they should look out for within this.
Sure thing. And I'm not on mute. Good. Essentially, a lot of these points have to deal with if you're new to the defense market. And so again, this is not really buying and selling to the government of Canada. This is really targeting primarily major OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. They're often going to be the prime contractor. They're going to be the OEM, say it's Bell Helicopter in my helicopter example, they're the ones that is going to sign on the dotted line with PSPC for the procurement of the helicopter fleet. What is suggested for SMEs who might not sell directly to Bell? Bell's a massive global company that will have major tier 1 partners. So these are, again, larger companies that might sell major parts of the helicopter. They sell the kind of structural components, avionics, engines. Think of all the bigger parts that Bell kind of puts together. And then we go by tiers. Then we drill down into tier 2s who kind of have more responsibility into kind of the smaller components, tier 3s and tier 4s and so on. Pardon me. So as an SME, you will want, if you're interested in and seeing what the ITB policy, how you can leverage that, you're going to want to do some homework in terms of who these companies are and who's in their supply chain. Because you might not, in most circumstances, you're not going to be selling to the big guy at the top. You're going to want to target some of the lower tiered. And often, I think I referenced on here, most of these companies have a ton of online resources and supplier portals. So you can register for more information. You can register to understand what qualifications they demand from their supply chain. So ISO 9001, there is, and maybe I defer back to Tara on any of the controlled goods certifications that is required to do work in defense, in the defense field. So their portals are extremely important, and it is a lot of homework in terms of knowing what these businesses do and how you can get involved. And again, it's our job at WD, and we work very closely with Tara and her team at OSME. We can help you navigate this, especially if it's a new field for you. It does take time to kind of learn the ropes. We often have events throughout the year, and in fact, today is the last day of our Western Innovation Forum. It was a 3-day virtual event where Western Economic Diversification hosts and features prime contractors who often will present on what they're working on and what they're looking for. And perhaps most importantly from that event, there was all afternoons B2B sessions. So interested companies can sign up to have one-on-one, 15-minute meetings with players in this space to get to know them and to ask questions and to try to seek out opportunities. I'll stop there in case I actually can't see if there's any questions popping up, but is that logical?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions, Rochelle, which I'll just go through. But then we're happy to come back, and I'm sure there are questions around this whole process of, because it might be one that's quite new to a lot of people, is not just applying directly to the government, but applying through somebody who already sells to them. And I'm sure there might be some questions around that we might want to expand on. But a couple of questions that we have. Is there a dollar amount below which opportunities are not made public and open? And how would small businesses engage and find those if that is the case?
There is, and I'm going to combine that answer with one of the other questions. So generally there's actually 3. So it is now $25,000 for goods, $40,000 for services, or $100,000 for construction. But I'm going to caveat that right away and say that we have things that we call standing offers and supply arrangements, which mean that we would identify pre-qualified suppliers. Most people generally refer to this as preferred suppliers. We're really careful. We don't call them preferred suppliers because it's not a preference. It's you've already established that you have the security clearances necessary. You've already established your capability to do things. So it's pre-qualified. I understand that will generally in most people's heads translate to preferred. So even things that are below those thresholds that I mentioned, 25,000, 40,000, and 100,000, are very often still competed through those pre-qualified instruments. And that question that had come up that was also there around how do we decide when we're going to compete or not compete. So one of the things is generally going to be that dollar amount. So if I have a really particular requirement, as an example, if I need to print business cards for someone in my office, that's not going to be a ton of money. It's going to be a very small amount. I'm going to be allowed to find a printer and get those business cards printed. Not a whole lot of need for business cards right at the moment, but when we're meeting people in person and I need those, because we're the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises, we really do make a point of trying to shift around who it is that we're going to for the printing of business cards. So that's an example. One of the others, there's 4 reasons why we are not required to have a public competition. So one will be dollar value, although like I said, sometimes they're competed anyway. One is intellectual property. So if there is only one company that can provide something, we don't have a request for proposal process, but we do have a process that we publicly announce that we are intending to go to a particular company for that purpose, so that if there's another company out there that can do that, they have some time to say, wait a minute, I can do that too. And if they really can, then we actually do go to competition. A third might be not in the public interest. And like I said, I've been around for a while. I worked on the very first purchase when the Government of Canada needed to acquire medical marijuana so that Health Canada was able to provide it to people who had the medical justifications. Well, at that time, that was the first time we were moving into that space. There wasn't a legal source of supply for marijuana. You couldn't exactly just post that on buy and sell and say, hey, who wants to sell us some pot? So we had to look at ways that we would find legal sources and then do it that way. But that might be another example. Certainly some of the things around COVID would have also fit into that. And then the other one is emergency. So if we need sandbags because a river is flooding, we don't have 40 days to wait to post a public tender to decide who might be able to sell us sandbags. Again, that's one of the things that sometimes we can have a competition ahead of time, so you might know who you would buy it from, but that doesn't really help if the flooding's in the Okanagan and the sandbags are somewhere else and can't get to where they need to be quickly. So pressing emergency is one of the others where we would not have to have a competition. How do you find out about those? How do you find about those opportunities? How do you find out that I might need business cards printed again? That's where I talked about that government electronic directory service being so valuable. And really that's where the kinds of things that our office does to help you will really come into play to kind of help you navigate that. And we do publicly report at the end of the year how much was publicly tendered and how much was not. And I'm more than happy to sit down with anybody and kind of show them all of the bits and pieces of government websites where all of this information can be found.
Thanks very much, Tara. We've got a couple more questions, which may be for you or any of your colleagues. Is there any room for SMEs to work as middle company between the buyer and the seller? I'm
sorry, I actually am not sure that I understand.
I'm imagining the person who posted it might want to post a clarification, but I'm imagining it's acting as a kind of a matchmaker of sorts.
Good question. Generally, that's what buy and sell does. We do sometimes work with human resources companies to help us identify candidates in particular spaces. I'm trying to think if there would be other intermediary type contracts that we would buy. What I would suggest is given the broad gamut of things, if you have something specific in mind, definitely reach out to us.
Okay, thank you. We have another question with a bit of a follow-up to it as well, with regards to what I think you said we shouldn't call the preferred supplier list, but is often thought of as such. And the person follows up with a note to say, GEDS is perfect, but how do we work our way through that list?
You have a couple of choices. One is to sit down and spend some time kind of going through. What I would recommend is give us a call and we can kind of help set you in the right direction, because each department can set up their directory slightly differently. If you just sit down to do it, it can seem massively confusing. 30 years in, I'm pretty good at speaking government, so I can help you with that.
All right, thanks, Tara. A question about the breakdown between procurement requests for services and requests for products. Do you have some kind of a sense on what the breakdown would be? And can products be manufactured overseas, or is Canadian made is almost mandatory?
Roughly, it varies year to year, but roughly it's generally about half and half. I mean, in a year when we spend $5 billion buying some new helicopters, it's going to be more heavily skewed to goods. But by and large, it's a fairly even shift. Anything that is subject to the international trade agreements does not have Canadian content requirements attached to it. Things that are not subject to the international trade agreements, so definitely some of the things that we were talking about today in the defense space, there may be Canadian content requirements, that whether there is or not will always be indicated in the public tender that's on buy and sell.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
Sure.
If I could just chime in just in terms of the ITB policy, and when an obligor gets credit for an ITB transaction, it will only get credit on the Canadian content of say the item. So Bell is providing the helicopters. They're going to buy their engines from a shop in Richmond. That shop in Richmond has parts from all over the world. That shop in Richmond will have to do some math and show their Canadian content for Bell to get credit on that value. So just to clarify that.
Thanks, Rochelle. Thanks for the clarification. We've got another question here, an interesting question in the area of sustainability. And the questioner is saying that I understand that the buy and sell program provides an opportunity for small businesses or small business suppliers of green products. Is there a minimum certification requirement as a green supplier?
Again, that's going to vary, and you'll find specific requirements in a request for proposal that's posted. On some things there is, and sometimes that's ISO 14000 or 14001 or whatever. It will vary. One of the things that client departments are aware of is the balance between requiring certification and the cost and process required to obtain and maintain that certification. So some will require it, some will not. Generally, as a rule, people try to do it where it would be an industry standard, that we're not introducing something new, that generally if you're in that space, it's certification you're going to have. Not always, and sometimes that's kind of one of those things I was talking about earlier, that people can say, oh, well, that's industry standard across lots of industries, not realizing that it may not be in one industry, or that that a lot of the suppliers in a particular space are smaller, and that the cost and process for ISO certification can be a real barrier. So sometimes they will look for different things depending on what it is they're looking for and how much of a barrier it may be to businesses to participate. So there is not one answer to that.
Okay, thank you, Tara. Just before we get to the next question that we have, a couple of requests for contact information. So I'm not sure if we're posting it through the chat room or if Jocelyn is going to be sending it out to attendees later, but perhaps someone could just let me know and then I can share with everybody what the process is going to be for sharing contact information. We have another question here. ITB policy is a great start. Has the government considered leveraging its power to award contracts that also have a component that can benefit Canadian consumers? So, for example, encouraging the company to provide goods at a low cost to all Canadians.
Yeah, I don't know if that's that's a really interesting question. I guess the first comment that comes to mind is that in the ITB world, or in maybe general doing business with government, as soon as the government tries to force a company to do something, that cost of the contract goes up. So that's something that we don't do. And from an ITB lens, that's kind of goes back to the market-driven policy. The one thing I'll mention, though, and it's a bit of a flip maybe to the question, is that should a Canadian company be involved in an ITB transaction and get onto a platform with one of these major OEMs, the export potential, and so getting into the global supply chains of that company is a massive opportunity. So that's it's not really answering the question, but it's a bit of a reverse view of it. You actually have access to a global market through the ITB policy in play at home. I'm sorry, I don't know if I can answer the providing goods at a low cost to all Canadians. Tara, do you have any insight on that?
I can add something, and it is actually one of the things that people referred to a little bit earlier. So I have not seen us say, in order to supply to us, you must offer something at a particular price to Canadian consumers or even to other Canadian businesses. And I'd have to really think. I mean, this is one of those things. I love these kinds of questions. I can spend all day talking about these kinds of questions, so I promise to keep the answers short. There are definitely examples where not necessarily the government of Canada. I'm not saying we haven't. I'm just saying I can't think of specific examples quickly, but there are definitely examples where governments have decided that they will purchase something. So when recycled paper first came onto the market, that was a really good example. Governments decided to buy recycled paper for two reasons. One, they wanted recycled paper because they wanted to support the concept that people should recycle paper. The second was that by recognizing that the government buys, and certainly back then, bought a lot of paper, that, I mean, if we go back to Economics 101, rather than moving up and down a demand curve, it would shift the demand curve, bringing the price down for everyone. So there definitely are times when governments choose to look at government purchasing as a policy lever, as well as direct fulfillment of things that the government needs. That's usually the example that I come up with. Some of the other, yeah, I will leave it at that. Like I said, more than happy to engage in these conversations with people.
Thanks a lot, Tara, and Rochelle, thanks for answering that one. And just for those people that are asking for Tara's contact information, she's posted that in the chat room, so you can have access to her email and telephone number there. So that brings us to the end, and thanks very much to all of our speakers today. Really good to hear from all of you, and lots of great information there. I think this is an area that's clearly of great interest to a lot of people, and the information was really well presented, and we appreciate that. So I really hope that our Burnaby and Tri-Cities members have been able to take away some great information on how to get involved with government procurement. And to wrap things up, I wanted to introduce Mike Hind, who's the CEO of the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce, to say a few closing remarks. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks to all our speakers. Great information out there. Anything we can do to grow the Canadian economy, I think, is a very positive thing. So there's some great ideas there. Thanks to the Burnaby Board of Trade for allowing us to partner with them on this. It's a great relationship we have, and hopefully we can build it over the next little while, because everybody working together, we're going to come out of this bigger and stronger, I feel. I see some of our members are on there, like Jason from Novo Textiles and some other people on there who have really capitalized and really sprung forward during this pandemic. So things like this can only help businesses grow, and that's what we're here for. So if you need any help at all from ourselves or Paul or any of the chamber network, we're here to help businesses grow. So please feel free to give us a call. Thanks, everybody, and we look forward to working with the Burnaby Board of Trade again and our good buddy Paul Holden.
Thanks a lot, Mike, and good to see you again. And thanks to all of your members for joining us today. So thanks everybody for joining today. Keep an eye out. There's lots more events coming up over the next little while. And who knows, before too long, we may actually be able to be in the same room as each other and enjoy getting back to that aspect of how we used to congregate and meet. So thanks, everybody. Thanks to our speakers, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.